Welcome to another exciting video by Pale Blue Thoughts. In this episode, we are delving into ancient myths that laid the foundation for religious stories found in the Vedas, Bible and Quran. Picture a time when humans gathered around campfires, captivated by the vast night sky and the mysteries it held. With no Netflix and video games, their imaginations ran wild, giving birth to these timeless tales. While these stories once shaped our societies, they are a bit outdated now. So join me for a storytelling session with Pale Blue Thoughts in our Evolution of Gods and Religion series. We are starting with Ale and journeying all the way to Allah. It's going to be an epic adventure. In the previous episode, we explored Enki and Nilhursak. Now, as time moved forward, Enki was replaced by another deity known as Ale. Ale, a Semitic term, simply means God. It's important to note that Ale wasn't just a single god. There were multiple Ales, each associated with different aspects of the physical world. Together, they were referred to as Elohim. This is similar to how Hindus venerate different aspects of the goddess, such as Lakshmi, Durga, Saraswati, Bhumi Devi, and Sita Devi, while recognizing them as manifestations of one Devi. Ale manifested in various forms, including El Shaddai, who appeared to figures like Abraham, Jacob, and Isaac in the Bible. You've likely heard the phrase, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The Bible identifies those individual gods as variations of the supreme god, Ale. Genesis hints that not only the Hebrew patriarchs, but also their neighbors in Canaan and others across Mesopotamia revered Ale as their highest deity. For instance, the king of Salem, which later became Jerusalem, greeted and blessed Abraham in the name of the God Most High, El Elyon. Those who worshipped Ale often named people with names ending in Ale, such as Gabriel, Samuel, Joel, Michael, and so on. Interestingly, Abraham offered to sacrifice his own son to this Ale. Yet, nowadays, anyone attempting such an act would be met with legal consequences and societal disapproval. Despite this, Abraham is often revered. In Judaism, he is the foundation of the special bond between Jews and God. In Christianity, he is a spiritual forefather to all Christians. In Islam, he is a link in the chain of Islamic prophets from Adam to Muhammad. The irony is hard to miss, isn't it? So where did the story we find in the Bible and the Quran come from? It actually came from Greece, not too far away. The Greeks had a tale about a guy named Athamas and his son Phrixus. Athamas was a regular king in Greek stories, and he had two kids, Phrixus and Helle, from his first marriage. Then he got married again to a lady named Ino, who wasn't nice to his first wife's kids. Ino wanted her own children to be more important. When there wasn't enough food, Ino came up with a tricky plan. She made up stories that the gods were angry and needed a sacrifice to be happy again. She convinced Athamas that he had to sacrifice his own son, Phrixus. As Athamas was about to do this really awful thing, he heard a voice saying not to do it. He looked around, but he didn't see anyone. He tried to go on, but he heard the voice again telling him to stop. Even though he couldn't see anyone, he still heard the voice. He was about to hurt the child when something amazing happened. Right when Phrixus was about to be sacrificed, a special ram or a big goat with a golden fleece showed up. This special ram, also called the golden ram, was sent by a god named Hermes to save Phrixus. The ram carried Phrixus and his sister Helle on his back, flying them away from their home. The same story is in the Quran, but a bit different. There is a man named Ibrahim and his wife Sarah who had a son named Ismail when they were very old. Ibrahim was super devoted to Allah and had strong faith. As Ismail got older, Allah tested Ibrahim by telling him to sacrifice his son to show his obedience. It's weird that a god would test with violence, but they can be pretty harsh, right? Anyway, Ibrahim kept dreaming he had to sacrifice Ismail. He thought that this was from Allah, so he told his son. Ismail was just as faithful. He said Ibrahim should do what Allah said and he'd handle it. So Ibrahim gets ready to sacrifice his son, but then the devil or the Iblis shows up. He tries to stop Ibrahim, but Ibrahim throws stones to make him go away. This happens 3 times. Then a ram appears, and that is what gets sacrificed instead. Now Muslims all over the world celebrate this as a big obedient thing. It is called Eid al-Adha or Bakrid. They sacrifice a lot of goats and rams. It's all because of this story. And in Mecca, where a ton of people go for the Hajj pilgrimage, they throw stones at 3 pillars that are supposed to be where the devil tempted Ibrahim. Honestly, this whole thing seems pretty wrong. It might have been okay back then, but nowadays it's just cruel and not right. Still, many folks believe in these stories and do this sacrifice thing without thinking too much about it. Now, Let's talk about another story, the flood myths. Almost every civilization had a flood myth, but that is not surprising when you think about it. Back in the day, people mostly lived near rivers. Water was super important, and being near it helped them survive. But when heavy rains came, floods could happen. So they made up stories that said floods were caused by angry gods. Even in India, there's a story in the Matsya Purana. It's about Vishnu, the fish, who's actually his first form. Vishnu tells a man named Manu about a huge flood that is coming and tells him to collect all the world's grains in a boat. In some versions, they also save all the animals. When the flood comes, the boat with Manu and sometimes 7 wise people floats and survives. But the most famous flood story is in the Bible about Noah and his big ark. But where did this story really start? Well, we need to look at an ancient stone tablet called the Enuma Elish. It has the Epic of Gilgamesh, which might hold the key to where this story came from. Here is the story. Once upon a time, some powerful gods named Anu, Enlil, Ninurta, Enugi and Ea gathered to talk about a big problem. There were too many humans around because they had lots of kids. So they decided to cause a huge flood to wipe out everyone and everything on earth. How kind-hearted. But one god, Ea, liked a human named Utnapishtim and told him the plan secretly. Ea told Utnapishtim to tear down his house and build a big boat instead to save living things. Utnapishtim wasn't sure about this idea. He wondered what people would say if they saw him destroying his house to make a boat. Ea told him to say that Enlil rejected him and he had to leave the city to be with Ea. So Utnapishtim got carpenters and workers to build the boat. Ea gave him the boat's exact size and instructions to make it. When the boat was ready, Utnapishtim put his valuable stuff like silver and gold inside. He, his wife, the workers and all sorts of living creatures got on board. It's a mystery how he got huge dinosaurs and kept meat-eating animals from attacking plant-eating ones. Anyway, when they were settled, the weather turned really bad and Utnapishtim shut the boat's door. The gods used their powers with thunder, lightning, storms and making everything dark. This crazy flood and storm lasted for 6 days and 6 nights and it flattened the land. Finally, the sea and storm stopped. All humans turned into clay and the land looked flat like a roof. Utnapishtim opened a window and felt fresh air. Utnapishtim was really sad and cried a lot when the flood was over. He looked around and saw land in the distance. His boat was stuck on a mountain called Nimush. On the 7th day, he sent out a dove, but it came back. He tried with a swallow and it also came back. Then he sent a raven, a crow-like bird, which didn't come back. So he knew the water was gone down and there was land. Utnapishtim wanted to thank the gods, so he had a big barbecue party on top of the mountain. He made a feast and cut up a sheep for the gods. When the gods smelled the cooking meat, they rushed over like flies to the food. The god Enlil came last and was really mad. He wanted everyone to die in the flood, but some humans had survived. The gods argued and Enlil blamed Ea for telling Utnapishtim the secret. Ea denied this accusation. Then Enlil saw Utnapishtim and his wife and felt good. He blessed them and Utnapishtim became a god, immortal. This story changed over time and ended up in the Bible with Noah instead of Utnapishtim. Something interesting is that these stories were told a long time ago. The first version comes from 2000 to 1500 BCE and the Matsya Purana, which has the Manu story, was written much later. So it's possible that the Indian story was inspired by the older Akkadian version. Let us talk about 2 more important gods before we finish. The first one is Baal. In the Bible, Baal was a big deal among Canaanite gods. He was often seen as the main rival of the Hebrew god Yahweh. Some experts think that he's like a Canaanite version of the Babylonian god Marduk and similar to the Assyrian god Hadad. In Canaanite stories, Baal was the ruler of the sky and also the god of the sun, rain, thunder, farming and plants. In the ancient Middle East, there were a lot of gods called Baals, but the most important one was a rival of the god of the Israelites. One reason for this rivalry was that the people who liked El, another god, lived by the Nile River's plains. The folks who worshipped Baal lived a bit higher up. Since Baal was a god of rain, they prayed to him for rain for their crops. This upset the people on the plains because too much rain would flood the Nile and ruin their crops. They used to argue and even fight over their gods. Those who followed El saw Baal as something like a bad spirit. Now there was another god named La. He was a moon god and there were several moon gods around at the time. At first, La was known among the Coptic people, but later on it moved to the Arabian region. The Arabs liked to add al before words to show greatness, so they made La into Allah and then later Allah. This is why the crescent moon is important in Islamic culture and their festivals start and end when they see the moon. The same La changed to Yah when it went to the Hebrew-speaking places, and from there it turned into Yahweh. So here is the deal. The same gods and stories, when they moved to different places, turned into different gods and stories. It's kind of silly that people who believe in these tales still fight over them like they are fighting over stories made up during a fun bonfire barbecue. It is important to see each other as fellow humans instead of just believers in certain gods. I hope the day comes to this country soon. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I'd also love to hear what you think about the ongoing series and if I should keep sharing the stories of how gods and religions changed over time. Please comment below and let me know. If you enjoy the content, please subscribe to the channel and share the video. I'll be back soon with another interesting episode. Until then, it's goodbye from Pale Blue Thoughts.